We mentioned already that Tu B'Shevat is coming. We've sang a couple of songs in our Pesukei de Zimra, and doing Rav Nachman's prayer reminded us of the potential of being with trees and in nature and taking time for that. And I thought that for our study this morning, we would resurrect a couple of Yiddish poems by Alter Esalen. You can find them on page 7 of your handout. My parents came from Yiddish-speaking homes, and they both spoke Yiddish. My mom basically fluently, and my dad almost fluently. He certainly could understand everything. But they often spoke whenever they went on trips to foreign countries where English was not the main language. And nowadays, English is sort of universal, but back in those days, it wasn't so much. And they would go to shul, and they would meet local Jews, and they would speak Yiddish to them. So it felt natural to share poems from Esalen. Alter Esalen was born in Russia, but he came to America, and he still wrote Yiddish. And he actually lived in Los Angeles for about 20 years before settling in Milwaukee. And he wrote hundreds of poems in volumes and received significant recognition, including the Harry Kovner Award for the best collection of Yiddish poetry. So he is, while I'm resurrecting him because a lot of us don't remember him, he was a big deal in his day for Yiddish-speaking Jews, particularly in North America. And this is actually very remarkable that he got these awards for being a significant Yiddish poetry writer, because he actually didn't really have much of an education. His father died when he was 10 years old, and his mother sent him as the eldest of 4 children to apprentice for 5 years as a carpenter. Yes, a Jew may be a carpenter. He remained a carpenter as his primary profession for the rest of his life, in fact. When he came to this country from Russia, he was already 15 years old, so he didn't know a single word of English. And it was his uncle who sponsored him, but his uncle died while Alter was coming over to this country, in transit, actually. And no other relatives living in the United States showed any interest in him. Perhaps maybe they felt they didn't really have the means to support another person in their household. So he took the name Alter, meaning the old one, because there's actually an Ashkenazic custom of renaming the eldest surviving son in the event of a father's early demise, as a way of asking the angel of death not to bother the family again. So it was a common custom when I was growing up. You may or may not have heard of it in where you lived or in your family, but he took that common custom. In any event, the themes of his poetry tend to be themes that he dealt with in his own life: loneliness, the bite of conscience, the scourge of poverty. And in writing about these themes, it seems like he's attempting to push back against them, to defy them, or at least somehow overcome them. So we're going to read 2 poems and think about them. 2 poems that seem to have trees at their heart. So let's begin. And I'll read them to save us time. The first one is in English. I'm not going to bother with the Yiddish, because I don't know how many of us really understand, and it would take too much time to unpack both the Yiddish and then the English. So, silence beyond words. In the silence of the night, the trees stand in melancholy calm. Only a faint rustle of leaves. On high, a star tremor. Fireflies flash in the folded bed linen of the fields. Silence streams from the moon. Silence covers the world. And from my heart, there comes joy. Joy that overflows in courage, praise, and expectation of honors. How quick the flight to highest height, the fall into deepest abyss. So anyone want to react? If you're via live stream, you can react by placing something in the chat if you'd like, something that struck you as interesting, significant, meaningful, whether it's a word, a phrase, or a theme. Anybody want to react to this poem? What might he be saying about the silence of the night? It's vast, number one, yes. But it also can be calming for him. The trees stand in melancholy calm. Sometimes at night, we can take advantage of the fact that we don't have the hustle bustle of the day, right? We're oftentimes so busy, it's hard for us sometimes just to stop during our daytime, just to feel, reflect, to let out loose some breath, to regain our grounding. We can remind ourselves of how tall we can stand and how proudly we stand. So that's one thing. What is melancholy calm? What does that mean to you? Anybody have a thought on that phrase? Serenity. Perhaps it's serenity. Melancholy calm. Yes. I didn't hear. Yeah, sometimes it can be sad melancholy for sure. And that's really interesting because by letting himself feel his melancholy, his sadness, and it almost releases it, right? Because then the silence that he continues with helps joy emerge from his heart. But it's hard to let your joy, to feel your joy and tap into your joy when the surface has some melancholy and sadness to it, right? We can contain both, but sometimes it's harder to feel the joy when we also are having something that makes us melancholy or even sad, as Esther suggested, right? Sometimes that emotion predominates. So we have to have time to stand like a tree and to let ourselves let out our sadness. And sometimes we have to do that at night also because it's harder to do it with people around. We don't always feel comfortable being vulnerable at a workplace or at a fun place. We tend to want to do that more and maybe more easily when we're alone with ourselves than in the midst of a group setting. Yes, the faint rustle of the leaves, yes, which is really, really interesting, right? We can stand, but sometimes it's the leaves or some little bit of noise or sound that can help really not just to get us our heart to move along with the leaves, right? It's almost like a nigun or a meditational piece. I don't know why the word left me, but something that repeats, a sound that repeats over and over. In any event, that is one poem. Oh, and what about trees here? What is trees a metaphor possibly for here? Since we have Tu B'Shvat coming up, I wanted to focus on the trees piece. Any thoughts? Perhaps they are metaphors for us. You know, the psalmist in Psalm 1 hints, and in Deuteronomy, it also hints that people are like trees in a lot of ways. I mentioned a couple of them because trees can be of various genders, more than two for sure. Just like people, there's more than two varieties of gender. Trees, like people, all need water to survive. Trees, like people, tend to function best in group settings. They tend to share and give off energy, as we spoke about earlier. There's lots of ways that trees and people are alike. So if trees are like people, we're best when we can stand. when we feel proud. Yes? The roots of trees can remind us of the generations, the roots of ourselves being deeply into the generations past and into our traditions, right? Like Shabbat. So thank you, Fran. Beautiful comment. So we're going to take that thought and we're going to move on to our second poem. Oh, just one other thing. I also wanted to relate this to our prayer for the first bracha, the Yotzer Or. We sang Rav Nachman's prayer, where Rav Nachman would also go into the trees, particularly since Rav Nachman was known to be a person who was depressed and sad and would go out into the trees to meditate and think and to let go of his sadness so that he too could find joy and function. I don't know that Alter Esalen knew anything about Rav Nachman. I really don't know, but it's interesting how his poem can feel as one in spirit with Rav Nachman's prayer as we sort of sang it through Debbie Friedman. Now let's go to the second poem at the bottom of page 7 of our handout, which is indeed titled Trees. Trees die not alone. They take along with them the violins of the winds, the hymns of the nests, the mirrors of the sun, the laughter of leaves, and a delicate perfume. They leave behind only the mystery of their unity and patience. Again, to me, another beautiful poem and sort of startling in the images. Anybody want to react to anything, the poem as a whole, or anything inside the poem that caught your heart's attention? And if you're at home, you're welcome to put any thought into the chat and maybe have a dialogue about the poem through chat. Anybody here have a thought about the poem? Well, I found the 5 metaphors to be very beautiful. That trees have have the violins of the winds, the hymns of the nests, the mirrors of the sun, the laughter of leaves, and a delicate perfume. And every tree being an individual, just like every person, every tree has its own sort of rings. We have our own prints, footprints, fingerprints, soul prints. We're all unique. Every tree is unique. What might these 5 metaphors, if trees are like humans, what might they be saying about us? Yes, Josh.
So the violins of the wind are how you react, or in this case, the trees react to the ambient environment. When the tree is dead or when you die, that no longer happens because it's not there for the ambient environment. Hymns of the nest, the joy that's brought by people who flock around you. Mirrors of the sun, so the sort of the conversion, how you convert the energy, again, of the ambient ambiance around you and change that into something usable, something that can be taken by other people, that can be shared. The laughter of the leaves, obviously, the leaves rustle, they make a sound, it can bring joy to people, just like the human laughter can bring joy to others. And then a delicate perfume, just the general joy of a person.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful way of interpreting these images. Violin of the winds, the way that each of us might, as Josh said, react to circumstances. The hymns of the nests, the way we take in what other people bring to our lives. The mirrors of the suns, what we give back to others, we reflect back at hopefully in a warm, kind way. The laughter of leaves, the joy that such communion with others and within ourselves brings to the world, a laughter and a delicate perfume, our own sweetness that comes from deep within our soul that can be let out into the world, right? And we all have that. I know sometimes we're pouty and sometimes we're a little sad or lonely, but when we're best, think of that we all have a delicate perfume. And we all can have untold unity of purpose in being with ourselves, with our synagogue family, with our friends, with others. And it's a sort of a beautiful thought. Anyone else want to react to anything in this poem? Yes, please.
It's a hard fact, but all of these attributes are also in harm's way due to our overuse of the land that is connecting those trees to us. All things, the air, the light, the wind. So it's important to be mindful. It's a beautiful poem. It stirs my heart, but in another way, it changes the stir.
Yeah, so thank you. So knowing that
A warning.
yeah, so thank you by letting us know that by realizing that our environment is in trouble significantly and trees are in trouble through our neglect, our malign neglect of the environment. And similarly, a lot of people find themselves in trouble because they sometimes are neglected too. People are neglected, sometimes malignly by society and by people who shun them wrongfully. And so this poem, Trees, can be a warning that we need to be more taking our own responsibility for the earth that was laid out in the opening chapters of Genesis, that we're supposed to be the guardians for God of the planet. But we're also supposed to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. So we're also need to be guardians for each other. And maybe we don't always do that in a good way. Maybe we don't do it at all some days or some moments. So the poem can be a beautiful warning. Thank you for sharing that. So we don't have a lot more time. Does anybody else have a thought? Is there any thought in the chat? We can take any time for one more. So these poems together really give us something to think about for Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is a time where we plant trees. That is, how do we make our earth suitable and nurturing for the next generation so that they can grow tall and thrive in their lives? Are we helping our planet with the next level of trees, but also for people as well? And what kind of a tree are we becoming? What kind of a tree are we now? Are we in concert with the other trees around us, forming a huge community? That's what trees do. Do we nurture ourselves like trees? How much water are we drinking? Not only physical water, but the water of each other and the nourishment that we can provide each other. Let's hope that this year we all grow into sturdy, strong, proud Jewish trees that also have a delicate perfume, that also give off the laughter of leaves, that give our warmth to others and take in the warmth that others have for us, that we hear the music and symphony of the world and contribute to it. May we be part of the solution to the problem of loneliness and neglect in our world by being a tree in concert with other trees who help other trees out. May this be a joyful and meaningful Tu B'Shvat holiday this week. Shabbat Shalom.